Hey everyone, Genome here, coming to the next episode of my Marvel Strike Force Beginner series. In this video, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the top 5 underrated characters that new players can acquire easily. I think these are characters that can really help you in the early game. Some of these weren't available, obviously, when I got started, so don't let my numbers on them kind of fool you or whatever. It doesn't mean they're not great. But yeah, a lot of people will tell you who the strongest are, but sometimes they're not easy to get to, or you gotta fill up the team with some other people. So let's go ahead and get into it. Before I do that though, I want to give one honorable mention, but he's not new player friendly. I got really lucky with him on my other account and pulled him out of a Mega Orb, 100 shards of him. But Baron Zemo will do so much for you in basically all of the game. In PvE content, you face so many minion characters that he just devastates them. He's good in arena, he's just good everywhere. Alright, so if you have the opportunity to get him for free or whatever, like right now they're doing real-time arena and all that, highly recommend you get him going. But yeah, so Zemo is a killing machine against the computer early and great for new players. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get into my top 5 underrated characters that newer players can acquire easily. Okay, for my number 5 pick is a character that many consider really bad, and while he is not great, he does have a saving grace, especially for new players, right? Has everything to do with his passive. His passive is amazing in the earlier and mid games, especially because there's no focus checks really to worry about, or not nearly as bad. Stripping off positive effects off the enemy team on every Spider-Verse's team's member's turn is incredible. That's what makes him so useful, is you can stick him on any team that has a Spider-Verse tag and his passive will work. So he's a semi-decent damage dealer on his own, and he's fairly tanky, but really it's the passive that does it. And a lot of new game players will have this kind of random assortment of characters, and you might get some Spider-Verse tags in there. So he's just a good addition to any team you're looking to fill out. Like maybe you only have 4 Spider-Verse characters or whatever. It doesn't hurt to throw them on there, and then you get a great passive out of it. Now, of course, he gets clips later on, but early on, he's an excellent choice. And another thing that makes him great is that he has 2 nodes to farm, and neither one of them is too terribly difficult to get to. The second Nexus one could take you a few weeks to get there, but get into the Nexus quick, by the way. So yeah, he's a great character to kind of fill the role in a Spider-Verse team, and I highly recommend him for newer players. So my number 4 pick could technically be higher on this list because he's a little more versatile maybe than some of the other ones, but he doesn't have any synergy. The last 3 I'm going to have are actually going to have some synergy with each other, but this guy is criminally overrated, and he only gets really recognized nowadays because of the mercs on war defense. But war defense is one of the last things you need to worry about as a new game player. It's important, don't get me wrong, it's just it takes forever to build those teams up, and you're not going to have Taskmaster right away, right? Almost virtually no chance of that happening, so really that makes it so much weaker without him on the team. But Merc Lieutenant is just good in his own right. Everything he does is actually pretty good.
Agreed.
Like, his basic is good when it throws out some ability energy. His special is what makes this guy. Basically every other turn you're gonna be throwing this out there. It's great, man. Great buffs right there. And even his passive will sometimes heal. It's just he's a very well-tuned minion character, and his only real downfall, of course, other than lack of damage, really, is like he's pretty fragile, so you got to put him on a team with some protection. But really, he could take you very far. He doesn't require any synergies to work well, and he makes your entire team better. He's like the Bard or something from Final Fantasy XI, right? Just a great minion, easy to get to. He's on an early-ish node. Not hard at all. Where's he at? He's over, yeah, Villain 3-3, so should be no problem to farm this guy up. I used to work with him a lot when I first got started in the olden days. So my number 4 pick is Mercenary Lieutenant. Alright, my number 3 pick actually ties in with the other 2, so it's kind of hard to rank them specifically, but he's a little less versatile than they are, so I'll go ahead and put him at number 3, and that's Strife. I didn't need Strife early on because I had other stuff going on. Of course, he wasn't around when I got first started, but needless to say, he's a pretty good tank with some caveats. Like, I would find him probably the best tank in the game early on if you meet requirements of villain mutants, right? Then he's just really good, even early on. It's just that his kit, a lot of it's done passively, which is nice. Like mutant villain ally drops below 50% health, and you gain a taunt. And then barrier, it's crazy. It just goes nuts. Yes, he's definitely most effective on the Marauders, but he also works very well with the two characters I'm going to show you next. His whole kit's just pretty solid. He does actually really good damage and has some control abilities. Of course, later on his ultimate, he can gain a taunt when he wants. He can strip taunts off other characters and redistribute things. That's not what to worry about for the new player because you're not going to have Mr. Sinister. But he just works because most early tanks aren't too good, and he is not bad. But once again, his saving grace is how easy he is to get a hold of. He is a blitz store character, the easiest farms in the entire game.
That's what I was going to say.
So, hey, why not go for him? I will say this, though. If you don't get the next two characters or decide to go for the next two characters early on for your early game forays, I wouldn't worry so much about him. But the next two are very versatile and can fit on just about any team. So if you plan on going for them, it might be a good idea to give Strife a call, right? And plus, you'd be building him up for later in the game, which is, he's good. Okay, my number 2 pick actually ties in with my number 1 pick. It's kind of hard to separate those two, but my number 2 pick is Toad. Toad is, once again, super easy to farm. He's a blitz store character. I mean, that's so friendly for the new player because you can get like 15 shards of those guys a day. You'll unlock them in no time, right? And his kit is just really good, and it works really well when you pair him up with my number 1 pick, right? But if you look at what he's got going on, yes, it looks like he's just made for Brotherhood, and he is a Brotherhood like necessity. But one of the first character in this list is going to be a Brotherhood character, so already you're going to have a little bit of synergy going on. Most of the other passive doesn't really do too much for it. It's where his ultimate comes into play, which is amazing. This usually comes out, maybe not without a full Brotherhood team. He might not go first against really fast players, but for the most part he will, especially in PvE content. It's just an amazing little first round thing he does, and it actually stacks. Okay, spoiler alert. It stacks taunt on Blob, right? It's great stuff, and it's a good way to kind of get out and let your damage dealers hit the ground running and your buffers get buffing and all that. And the rest of his kit's just solid. You know, he's got a slow and offense down on his basic. He's got, he can prolong negative effects on the enemy. This is not going to be effective. It's going to be only for 3 characters, really, because there's no Magneto on the team yet. But, you know, it's never bad to prolong stuff. His one real weakness is he does very little to no damage. You know, he's not a damage dealer, but he strips buffs off the opposing team. He throws taunt on my number 1 pick, and he's just versatile. And then he's got the villain mutant tag too, so that ties in very well with Strife. So Toad is my number 2 pick for underrated characters for new players. And for my number 1 pick, it should be no surprise if you listen to number 2, but and there was definitely a theme going on with these last 3, and that is Blob is my number 1 pick for most underrated characters for newer players to acquire. Whoa. Blob is a little bit harder to farm than Strife and or Toad because he's in the arena store, but it's still a fairly easy one, and he has some other perks if you want to go ahead and unlock him too, like him unlocking Magneto. He's good on 2 mutant teams at the end, and really just about anywhere. He's so versatile, we'll go over that in a second. And he's just a good overall character, so let's talk a little bit about what makes him probably the most underrated, at least for newer players, character. Some of the high-end people talk about him, but it's almost always on Marauders and all that. So he can do good with just a few other mutant allies, right? Once again, he'll have a little bit of synergy because Toad will probably be on the team that you run him with, right? But it's his passive that makes this guy really strong. Of course, he gains offense up. That really has to do with war. It's a Coulson thing, but I guess it's not bad. It's never bad to have offense up, usually, you know. On enemy turn, apply 1 deflect to a maximum of 3 to adjacent allies. So it's very important where you position Blob so he gets the most effect. Usually at the bottom part of a V is good because it'll throw out deflects like crazy. And especially if you're reversing fast teams, it's just awesome to get all those deflects. That's what makes him good on just about any team, to be honest with you. So he really adds a lot of defense to your team. the rest of this kit really mostly has to do with the Brotherhood, but really it's that one passive right there that makes him excellent. And also, he will get some, like, whenever he does like things like this, because Toad will probably have a few buffs on him, probably. Of course, he copies it, but every time he does any of his abilities, he does a little bit of damage, ship damage, and 2 of them are AoEs, which is great. So, once again, not nearly as effective without Magneto, but like his whole kit just works, right? And when you pair him up with Strife and Toad, it makes a pretty effective little trio. You got a lot of defense there, so if you really want, you can throw some sort of healer in there. I'm not real big on heals in the early game, but or just a couple more damage dealers to stack in. They're going to have time to get things moving. So I think those 5 characters, really more like 4 of those characters, will really take you places. Green Goblin's more of a filler character, but a lot of times he gets overlooked because he's not good in the mid or late game, really. But in the early game, he ties in well with what you may have on your roster. So that's pretty much all of them right now. If you have any other suggestions, but please feel free to put them in the comments below. But I think new players will often forget about these characters and only think about them for what they give you later. Like, oh, Strife's only good in Marauders, Blob and Toad are only good in Brotherhood, or Blob's only good on Marauders and Brotherhood. He's a very versatile character. But it's like, you know, characters like Merc Lieutenant can fit just about anywhere in any roster space, and it's almost criminal to work on them early. So hopefully this helps out some newer players out there, or maybe some players who are looking for something a little bit different. And until next time, this is Genome, out.